The crystal chandeliers of the Meridian Hotel ballroom cast dancing shadows across marble floors as Manhattan's elite gathered for another glittering evening of champagne and calculated conversations. Among the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits, whispers carried like smoke through the opulent space. But tonight, the gossip centered on one woman whose presence commanded both pity and admiration. Ava Sinclair stood at the entrance, her chin lifted with defiant grace despite the weight of recent betrayal crushing her shoulders. 6 months pregnant and recently abandoned by her husband, she had every reason to hide away from this world of privilege and power. Instead, she had chosen to face it head-on, wearing dignity like armor even as her heart bled from wounds still fresh. The murmurs began the moment she crossed the threshold. Look at her, trying so hard to pretend she's not broken. Everyone here knows she's nothing without Daniel. The words stung like glass shards, but Ava didn't flinch. She kept her composure as she moved deeper into the room, her emerald gown flowing around her growing form. Guests parted like waves before her, some offering pitying glances, others admiring her courage, and still others simply marveling at the audacity of discarded wife daring to return to such a stage. Daniel Thorne, feeding off the attention like a predator savoring a kill, guided his new companion, Selena, more toward Ava with deliberate malice. He wanted this confrontation. He wanted to crush whatever dignity she had left right in front of the city's elite, to establish his dominance once and for all. "Watch this," he muttered to Selena, his arrogance swelling like a toxic tide. They stopped just a breath away from Ava, close enough that she could smell his familiar cologne mixed with the sickly sweet perfume of his mistress. Daniel's voice rose loud enough to silence the nearby crowd, each word calculated for maximum humiliation. "Ava, I didn't expect to see you here. Shouldn't you be at home resting? After all, without me, I'm not sure how you can even afford a cab to this hotel." Selena's laughter rang out like breaking crystal, her perfectly manicured hand stroking Daniel's chest as if to claim him publicly before the watching crowd. "Oh, Daniel, don't be cruel." Maybe she begged for an invitation. Poor thing must be desperate for attention. Do you think she's here to win you back? A ripple of cruel laughter from the surrounding guests echoed their mockery. Ava's stomach tightened, the baby inside her stirring, as if sensing her distress, but she refused to show pain. She locked her gaze on Daniel, her voice emerging calm, yet cutting despite the storm raging within her. "You underestimate me, Daniel. You always have. But tonight, you'll see just how wrong you are." Daniel raised an eyebrow, his expression dismissive and condescending. "Is that a threat, Ava? You don't scare me. You're nothing but my ex-wife with a swollen belly, and soon enough you'll fade into the background where you belong." The crowd gasped at his harshness, but Daniel relished their shock. To him, cruelty was strength, dominance was victory. He believed he had won this battle before it even began. He believed she had no cards left to play, no power left to wield. But Ava's silence carried the weight of an approaching storm. She turned away without another word, her eyes locking onto the stage where the Sinclair crest gleamed above velvet curtains, like a beacon calling her home. Daniel had mocked her publicly, certain he'd destroyed her spirit completely. But in moments, the truth about Ava's identity would shatter his world like glass. The gala, once a glittering stage for the city's most powerful, had transformed into a silent theater of calculated cruelty. Guests who had come to sip champagne and gossip about mergers now leaned closer, hungry to witness the scandal unfolding between Daniel, Selena, and the woman he had so callously abandoned. Daniel basked in the attention like a performer under spotlights. He thrived on spectacle, on watching others squirm under his calculated words and deliberate humiliations. With every dismissive glance and mocking smirk, he worked systematically to strip Ava of what dignity remained to her. Selena, resplendent in her crimson gown that clung to her figure like liquid fire, matched his cruelty with sharp jabs disguised as concerned observations. Her voice dripped with false sympathy as she addressed Ava once more. "Oh, Ava, darling, I hope you didn't come here thinking you'd be welcomed with open arms. This is a world for winners, for those who know how to play the game. And you, well, you chose the wrong man to depend on. Now look at you, alone, abandoned, expecting a child you'll have to raise without support. Laughter rippled through their small circle of onlookers, emboldened by Daniel's obvious approval. Ava's face flushed with suppressed emotion, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. She felt the weight of every stare, the sting of every whispered judgment cutting through her carefully constructed composure. Her hands moved instinctively to cradle her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the venom poisoning the air around them. Daniel leaned closer, his tone cruel enough to pierce through the music and chatter surrounding them. "You'll regret walking into this room tonight, Ava. You don't belong here anymore. This is my world now, not yours. And if you think anyone here will side with discarded wife carrying another man's bastard, you're more delusional than I thought." The words sank deep, reopening wounds Ava thought she had carefully sealed. For a moment, her legs felt weak, threatening to buckle beneath her. She fought back tears with every ounce of strength she possessed, refusing to let them fall and given the satisfaction of seeing her completely broken. But inside her chest, pain burned like wildfire. She remembered the promises he had made during their courtship, the tender words whispered in darkness when love seemed eternal and unbreakable. She remembered believing him when he said he would be a father, a husband, a true partner through life's challenges. And now that same man stood before her, humiliating her in front of hundreds of witnesses, parading his mistress as if she were the prize, and Ava nothing more than a discarded mistake. Selena smirked and brushed a manicured hand over Daniel's shoulder, her eyes glinting with triumph as she delivered another poisonous barb. "Honestly, Daniel, it's almost tragic. She still thinks she matters, still believes she has some kind of power. Poor Ava, trying so desperately to play strong when everyone can see she's completely broken inside." More gasps scattered the crowd like falling leaves, but no one stepped forward to defend her. The wealthy rarely risk their carefully maintained reputations for the sake of compassion, especially when it might align them against someone as influential as Daniel Thorne. Ava stood alone in the middle of the social storm, her chest rising and falling in increasingly uneven breaths. For the first time that night, doubt crept into her mind like poison. Was she truly strong enough to face this public execution of her character? Had Daniel been right all along? Was she just a powerless woman, abandoned and vulnerable at her lowest point? The orchestra swelled into another piece, the music almost mocking her silence with its beauty. Ava's throat tightened as her vision began to blur with unshed tears. Her mind screamed for escape, for the safety of shadows and solitude, but her feet remained rooted to the marble floor. She couldn't collapse here, not in front of him, not while he watched with such satisfaction. Her gaze swept desperately across the crowd until it landed on a distinguished older man standing near the stage. Jasper Hale, her father's lawyer, caught her eye and gave the faintest nod, as if to remind her that her story was far from finished. A flicker of hope stirred inside her chest, fragile but persistent. Ava inhaled slowly, steadying herself against the tide of humiliation threatening to drag her under. Daniel thought he had crushed her completely, believed she had nothing left to offer the world. But deep inside her heart, something unbreakable was beginning to rise from the ashes of her former life. He had humiliated her publicly, stripped away her dignity piece by piece. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this same stage would soon witness his own spectacular downfall. The cruel spectacle had ended for most guests, who drifted back to their champagne glasses and shallow conversations about stock prices and vacation homes. But for Ava, the humiliation clung to her like a second skin, following her as she finally escaped the ballroom's suffocating atmosphere. She had walked out with her head held high, pretending that Daniel's venom hadn't pierced her heart like daggers. But once the gilded doors closed behind her, shutting out the noise and judgment, the weight of everything came crashing down like an avalanche. Ava stumbled into the hotel's deserted corridor, the echo of her heels chasing her like ghosts of better times. Her chest heaved with suppressed sobs, and the strength she had forced herself to display shattered the moment no critical eyes were watching her performance. She collapsed onto a velvet bench, burying her face in trembling hands as tears flowed freely, hot, relentless drops carrying the concentrated pain of betrayal, abandonment, and public shame. Her mind replayed the evening's cruelties on a vicious loop. Daniel's sneering contempt, Selena's mocking laughter, the crowd's complicit silence. She had weathered storms before, survived challenges and heartbreak, but nothing had prepared her for this level of systematic destruction. The father of her unborn child had not only discarded her as worthless, but had then torn apart her dignity in public, as if she were nothing more than a pawn he'd finished using in his game of power. "Why?" she whispered into the corridor's emptiness, her voice cracking with exhaustion and grief. "Why wasn't I enough?" The baby kicked inside her, a sharp reminder that she wasn't completely alone in this world. But instead of comfort, the sensation sent another wave of panic crashing through her already fragile composure. How could she possibly raise this child alone? How could she protect an innocent life when she herself felt so utterly broken? Her breath came in shallow, rapid bursts as fear clawed at her chest with icy fingers. For a fleeting, desperate moment, she wished she could simply vanish, dissolve into shadows, escape the crushing weight of constant judgment and measurement against impossible standards. Her reflection in an ornate mirror across the corridor mocked her mercilessly, a young woman with mascara-streaked cheeks, swollen red eyes, and a body trembling under expectations she could never meet. Daniel's cruel words echoed again in her mind like a curse. "You're nothing without me." What if he was right? What if she was destined to struggle, to raise a child without the power, security, and respect she so desperately needed? The corridor door creaked open, and Ava startled, quickly wiping her face with shaking hands. But it was only a hotel staff member who glanced at her with quiet pity before hurrying away, leaving her alone with her pain once more. Even pity cut deep tonight. She pressed her hand firmly against her belly, closing her eyes and drawing strength from the life growing within her. "I'll try," she whispered to her unborn child, her voice barely audible in the empty hallway. "I don't know how yet, but I promise I'll try to be strong enough for both of us." Her phone buzzed inside her clutch, and with unsteady hands, she pulled it out. A message from Jasper Hale glowed on the screen, its words carrying the weight of destiny. "Ava, you must not give up hope. Tomorrow, everything changes. Come to my office at noon. The truth awaits." Her tears slowed as confusion mixed with the faintest spark of curiosity. What could possibly change in a single day? What truth could he know that she didn't? What power remained hidden in her devastated world? Ava drew in a shaky breath, her despair still heavy but now pierced by a fragile thread of possibility. She had collapsed under the weight of cruelty. She had wept until her tears ran dry. But somewhere inside her battered heart, something stirred. Faint yet undeniable, like the first green shoots of spring breaking through winter's frozen ground. The night had broken her completely, but tomorrow promised the first glimpse of a truth that would rebuild her from the foundation up. The following morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming across Ava's modest rented apartment, a stark contrast to the tempest still raging in her heart. She had barely slept, her exhausted body bearing the weight of tears while her mind circled endlessly around Daniel's calculated cruelty. Yet clutched in her trembling hand, Jasper's mysterious message continued to burn like a dying ember refusing to be extinguished. Tomorrow, everything changes. At precisely noon, Ava found herself standing before a towering skyscraper on Madison Avenue, its glass and steel facade reflecting the bustling city below. The Sinclair crest gleamed discreetly above the revolving doors, etched in brass that caught the afternoon light, like a beacon from another world. She hesitated on the sidewalk, her pulse quickening with each passing second. Few people knew she was William Sinclair's daughter. Even fewer understood what that connection truly meant in the corridors of power. For years, she had deliberately buried her lineage beneath layers of silence and ordinary living, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of expectations that came with her family name. Now, stepping into this monument to corporate power felt like unsealing a vault she had sworn never to open again. Inside, she was greeted by Jasper Hale, her father's most trusted legal advisor. Age had silvered his hair and lined his face, but his eyes remained sharp as surgical steel, softened out only by genuine compassion as he rose from behind an imposing oak desk. "Ava," he said gently, his voice carrying the warmth of someone speaking to a frightened child he had watched grow into a woman. "It's time." Her brows knitted together in confusion, emotional exhaustion making it difficult to process his meaning. "Time for what, Jasper? I don't understand. My life is falling apart piece by piece." Daniel has left me with nothing. I have no power, no resources, no future. You have everything, Jasper interrupted with quiet firmness. He slid a leather folder across the polished desk, its binding embossed with the Sinclair seal in gold relief. Your mother wanted you to grow up free from the poison of money and greed, away from the corruption that power can bring. She hid you from this world for as long as possible. But she also ensured that when the right time came, you would be able to claim what was always rightfully yours. Ava's hands trembled as she opened the folder with reverent care. Inside were documents bearing her name in elegant script. Trust fund statements, stock certificates, real estate holdings, and a formal declaration of inheritance that left her breathless with its implications. Jasper's voice remained steady as he explained the magnitude of what lay before her. You are the sole heir to the Sinclair Dynasty, Ava. Every company, every holding, every estate, yours by birthright. Your father ensured that no one else could touch these assets, no matter what happened. You are not powerless, my dear. You are one of the wealthiest women in the world. Her breath caught in her throat, the words feeling surreal, like dialogue from someone else's life. Me? But I've been living like nothing special. Daniel thinks I'm completely dependent, utterly worthless without his support. Daniel doesn't matter, Jasper said with sharp conviction. He chose greed over love, power over partnership. He discarded you because he believed you were weak and defenseless. But he doesn't know the truth about who you really are, and that ignorance will become his undoing. Ava, you are not the victim in this story. You are the storm waiting to break. Ava's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't born of despair. Instead, something fiercer burned behind them, anger, resolve, and a gradual awakening of power she kept hidden for far too long. She thought of Daniel parading Selena through that ballroom, mocking her publicly, reducing her worth to nothing in front of hundreds of witnesses. And suddenly, she could envision it clearly. The exact moment when his smug satisfaction would crumble into horror as he realized the woman he had humiliated was completely untouchable. Her fingers tightened around the folder's edges, feeling its weight like armor settling around her shoulders. The legacy that had once felt like chains now felt like wings preparing to lift her above those who had tried to destroy her. Jasper leaned closer, his tone becoming almost conspiratorial. You have a choice to make, Ava. You can stay silent. Let him continue believing his lies about your worthlessness. Or you can show all of them, who Ava Sinclair truly is. Ava inhaled deeply, her tears crystallizing into something harder and more valuable than diamonds. For the first time in months, she wasn't afraid of Daniel Thorne or his capacity for cruelty. Instead, she was ready to demonstrate the full extent of her power. The days following his revelation felt like stepping through a portal into an entirely different existence. Ava Sinclair, once dismissed as a powerless pregnant woman abandoned by her husband, began rising from the ashes of her former life with methodical precision. Her despair hadn't disappeared, but had been forged into something unshakable, a foundation of steel upon which to build her comeback. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't simply surviving from day to day. She was preparing for war. Jasper guided her through the complex transition with patient expertise, arranging private meetings with financial advisors, signing transfer documents, and unlocking accounts that had remained sealed for years. Each signature Ava wrote felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that Daniel had tried to erase from existence. But Jasper reminded her of something even more important than the numbers in bank statements. Ava, this isn't just about wealth accumulating accounts. It's about stepping into the role your mother always knew would eventually claim, strength wrapped in grace, power hidden beneath humility until the moment it's needed most. Ava studied her reflection in the mirror of the Sinclair family townhouse one morning, seeing herself clearly for the first time in months. Her old clothes, worn and faded from years of deliberately modest living, no longer matched the woman she was becoming. Her cheeks remained soft from pregnancy. Her eyes still carried traces of recent exhaustion. But there was something new there now, a glimmer of purpose that hadn't existed before. No more hiding, she whispered to her reflection with growing conviction. A team of professionals was assembled, stylists, designers, and advisors who had served the Sinclair family for decades. They didn't simply transform her outward appearance. They prepared her to re-enter a world that had previously ignored her existence. Silk gowns were tailored to drape elegantly over her changing figure. Perfectly fitted suits highlighted her naturally regal posture. Her hair, once simply tied back in practical styles, now framed her face in waves that declared quiet confidence. But Ava wasn't interested in mere vanity or shallow display. She wanted presence, the kind of commanding aura that spoke before words were necessary. She chose attire that conveyed dignity rather than excess, elegance without arrogance. During fittings, she found herself thinking constantly of Daniel. He had once mocked her for buying second-hand dresses, sneered at her frugal lifestyle choices, and told her repeatedly that she looked like someone who didn't belong among truly wealthy people. She imagined his expression the first time he would see her again, not as a discarded wife he had abandoned, but as the dynasty's rightful heir stepping into her birthright. That thought alone strengthened her spine with resolve. Beyond superficial changes, Ava immersed herself completely in understanding the responsibilities her inheritance would bring. She studied detailed board reports, attended strategy sessions, and listened carefully as Jasper explained the intricate web of Sinclair Industries' operations. She asked penetrating questions that surprised even herself with their insight, demonstrating an intuitive grasp of complex business relationships. There was no trace remaining of the meek woman Daniel had once controlled and manipulated. This emerging version of Ava was deliberate in her movements, thoughtful in her responses, and steadily growing into full scope of her power. But during quiet evening hours, when the townhouse grew silent around her, Ava still felt the deep ache of isolation. She would touch her growing belly, whispering promises to the child who had unknowingly carried her through the darkest period of her life. "You'll never feel ashamed of your mother," she murmured into the peaceful darkness. "You'll know that I fought for us, for our rightful place in this world, and that I never surrender to those who try to break us." On the eve of her first public appearance as the acknowledged Sinclair heir, Jasper entered her study, wearing a quiet smile of satisfaction and pride. "The board is prepared for your emergence, Ava. Tomorrow the city will finally know the truth, and tomorrow Daniel will understand the magnitude of his mistake." Ava closed the final report folder and rose gracefully to her feet. She smoothed the silk of her navy gown, feeling the weight of diamonds at her wrist, catching lamplight like captured stars. Her transformation was complete in every meaningful sense. She was no longer the discarded wife, sobbing alone in empty corridors. She was Ava Sinclair, heir to a dynasty that could reshape the economic landscape, and soon Daniel would face the woman he had so catastrophically underestimated. The night of the Sinclair Industries board gala arrived with all the drama of an approaching storm disguised in glittering splendor. The ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel gleamed under massive chandeliers, every crystal surface catching and reflecting light like trapped lightning. The city's elite flooded the elegant space, executives whose decisions affected thousands of employees, investors who could make or break entire companies, politicians whose influence reached across continents. Each guest was eager to see and be seen, to network and position themselves advantageously. But beneath the polished conversations and champagne toasts pulsed an undercurrent of anticipation. Whispers circulated about the Sinclair heir finally stepping into the spotlight after years of mysterious absence. Daniel Thorne had arrived early, smugly confident and accompanied by Selena Moore, who clung to his arm like an expensive accessory. He had chosen his tuxedo with meticulous care, every detail calculated to project success and dominance. This was his preferred environment, a place where he could network with the powerful and perhaps secure another lucrative deal to feed his insatiable ego. Selena, draped in diamonds he could barely afford, giggled appreciatively at his every word while her eyes constantly scanned the crowd for signs of envy and admiration from other women. They were laughing about some private joke when the ballroom doors opened with dramatic timing. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled crowd like wind through grain. Conversations faltered mid-sentence, heads turned in perfect synchronization, as Ava Sinclair made her entrance. She wasn't simply present in the room. She commanded it with effortless authority. Draped in a gown of deep sapphire silk that seemed to capture and hold light, her posture radiating centuries of aristocratic breeding, she moved with the steady confidence of someone who knew exactly where they belonged. Despite carrying her child, She looked like destiny itself taking physical form. The very atmosphere seemed to shift and rearrange itself around her presence. Daniel's practiced smile froze on his face, as if carved from ice. Selena's grip on his arm tightened unconsciously, her painted nails digging into expensive fabric. The crowd parted naturally as Ava walked forward, acknowledging respectful greetings with gracious nods that demonstrated both humility and unmistakable authority. She made her way steadily toward the stage where the Sinclair crest glowed like a beacon above velvet curtains. The board chairman rose to welcome her, his voice steady but tinged with barely contained excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the suddenly silent ballroom, "tonight is not merely another celebration of corporate success. Tonight we have the profound honor of welcoming the rightful heir of the Sinclair dynasty, Miss Ava Sinclair." The applause that followed was thunderous, shaking the chandeliers and reverberating through the marble corridors beyond. But for Daniel, the world collapsed into perfect, devastating silence. He turned to Selena with a face drained of all color, his voice barely a whisper. "What did he just say? That can't be possible." Selena blinked rapidly, her confident smirk crumbling into confusion and growing alarm. She's the heir? That can't be true. You said she was nobody, worthless without you." But it was absolutely true. As Ava took the microphone with practiced ease, her voice rang out with crystal clarity that pierced every corner of the opulent hall. "For years, I chose to live quietly in the shadows of my family's empire. I wanted love instead of wealth, genuine partnership rather than raw power. But when betrayal struck with deliberate cruelty, when I was humiliated and abandoned at my most vulnerable moment, I realized something fundamental about the nature of strength." Her gaze swept across the mesmerized audience with laser precision. True strength cannot remain hidden forever. It demands to be acknowledged, demands to be respected. Tonight, I reclaim my name, I reclaim my legacy, and I reclaim the dignity that others tried to strip from me. The crowd erupted again in sustained applause mixed with awe and genuine admiration. Daniel's mouth twisted with rage and disbelief as his carefully constructed world view crumbled in real time. He muttered desperately to himself, "She played me. She lied about everything. She manipulated me from the beginning." But Selena was already pulling her arm away, her calculating eyes narrowing as she rapidly assessed this dramatic shift in power dynamics and began planning her own survival strategy. Daniel, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, looked genuinely small and powerless. Ava's gaze swept across the audience one final time before settling on him with calm, devastating precision. She didn't need to call him out by name. Everyone in that room knew exactly who he was and what it had done to her. Her serene smile cut deeper than any direct insult could have managed. "To those who underestimated me, who believed I was powerless and worth discarding, I want to express my gratitude. You reminded me that diamonds are created under intense pressure, and I am no longer hiding my true nature from anyone." The final round of applause shook the building's foundation, and Daniel felt every clap like a physical blow. The man who had once declared Ava worthless now stood completely exposed and powerless in a room where she was absolutely untouchable. His empire of lies and manipulation had finally met its match, and Ava Sinclair had emerged victorious from the ashes of her former life.